Welcome to the Construction Leading Edge, the podcast dedicated to helping construction professionals become better entrepreneurs and leaders. Now, let's get started. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Construction Leading Edge, the site and podcast dedicated to helping construction professionals become more effective entrepreneurs and leaders. My name is Todd DeWalt, and I'll be your host today. We have a treat today. Today I'll be interviewing Bob Brown. He's the CEO and president of American Asphalt Company, a New Jersey-based company he purchased in 1986 and has since grown from a 5-person operation to its current workforce of over 100 employees. Bob's also been involved with a number of other entrepreneurial endeavors during his career and is an active member in several trade organizations and nonprofits. I'm excited about this interview. I really feel like I'm going to learn a lot from Bob, and I expect that you will as well. So, Bob, thank you so much for doing this interview today.
You're welcome, sir.
Well, let's go ahead and jump into it. As I was looking around your website, I noticed that you have your company's core values posted on the website. Can you tell us a little bit about how important it is to you to publish your core values?
That is extremely important. It's really the cornerstone of our business foundation, and that has a ripple effect through a lot of contacts, organizations, whether they're suppliers or customers or our own employees or our management team or our structure. So those core values came out of a study of our own management team of how we interrelate and how we could be better as a team and be focused and be aligned with what's important to us. And the first cut of that had the same core values listed, but one of my management team came up with by putting them in a different order, we could spell out the word right. And RIGHT are the 5 core values: the R for respect, the I for integrity, the G for honoring God, the H for honesty, and the T for trust. And by saying we do things right, I've challenged my whole company to live, eat, breathe those values. And what's in it for them is that if they can own those values and work by those values, they don't have to ask me a lot of questions, or they don't have to ask their manager a lot of questions. The decisions they'll make with their own intelligence will be the right decisions, and the company will be able to have their back. So it's good for them if they can understand how we want to conduct our business, and if they follow those core values, that then ripples into the customers, that our customers know that we're honest and we're going to do what we say we're going to do, which is integrity. So they want to deal with a company that puts it up front. This is what I expect, and if my employees can't live by those, they can't be on my bus. And I've had the unfortunate circumstance to had to leave a few good, talented people go, but they were talented in the proficiency of the work, but not in the ownership of my core values. And that's something that's like a non-negotiable. You're with me or you're not. And if you're not, God bless you, move on. But I insist that my people here own those core values.
What are some practical ways that you ingrain your core values into the culture of your business?
Well, a shortcut value is for the past 6 months or 8 months, every time I have a meeting with any portion of my employees, I ask them at the beginning of the meeting, what does right stand for? And my employees now know that whoever raises their hand and can tell me those 5 words, I give them a $5 bill. So there's a little competition, a little jesting about it. And, everybody would like a $5 bill. So I'm hoping that there'll be some peer pressure to remember what those values are. But more so than that, that's the jovial version. The real heartfelt version, it's top down, just like anybody would teach you with a safety culture in a company, that if the president of the company doesn't wear a hard hat when he gets out of his vehicle, or doesn't wear a safety vest, well, he doesn't really take safety to heart. It's nice to say, but he's really not on board. Or he doesn't fund the safety training, or he doesn't have an AED in each place of employment, or the first aid kits are depleted, or whatever the issue is. So it's that top-down reflection. The company is going to be a reflection of the owner. So I live those values. I don't ever treat anybody without respect. I don't raise my voice. I don't ever cheat anybody. When we go out and do a job, if it's 2-inch thick pavement, I expect there to be 2-inch thick pavement there. I don't want to give away anything extra, but I also don't want to take advantage of the customer and give him less than he paid for. So the fact that I won't put up with those shenanigans, and people can look at my actions and how if somebody overpays me, we give them back the money that we were unrightfully sent. Those are all demonstrative actions that people can look at me and say, well, that's what he does, and he lives by his own mantra. If I varied from that, trust me, all 100 people that work for me have a vision of me somehow, some way, and that news would just deplete the whole object of the whole thought of having a core value and living by it.
Sure. So would you say that, is it fair to say that it's more important to act out your core values as the leader than it is to publish them?
Oh yeah, it's so every company comes up with a vision statement and a mission statement and core values, and typically, they're forgotten. If you ask somebody in the company 6 months later, what are they? Nobody can remember, and it's a challenge in this country for all businesses to have something meaningful. People want to join a company that's changing the world and has some relevance and something to be proud about. And we're all in different segments of the industry. In the construction industry, we build things, and you can look over your shoulder at the end of the day and be proud that you left the world a little better than when you started. But how you go about doing that? Did you pay your suppliers? Did you, not give your customer what he was supposed to do? Did you yell at your employee and disrespect him rather than train him properly with what's expected? And how you conduct your business, it just goes to those core values. So to me, it's ultra important that things are in alignment and there is something that people can count on, a dependable, steady, repeatable expectation of behavior. When they come to work, they know they're not going to get yelled at. If they do something wrong, they know they're going to get disciplined, but they're not necessarily going to get fired. The idea is to teach them, not to reprimand them and push them out the door. Turnover is costly. We'd rather look in the mirror when somebody does something wrong and say, wait a minute, maybe we're partly to blame. Did we properly train this person? Did anybody take the time to show them what is the expectation? So once again, it goes right back to being honest with our employees, having respect for the employees. They're here. They want to give me a good day's work. I expect them to give me a good day's work. So it's a two-way street, a win-win proposition.
Gotcha. Let's go back in time a little bit. Tell us a little bit about what it was like when you started with American Asphalt Company. Tell me a little bit about what was the company like? How did you get into the business, and the first couple of years in the business?
I grew up in a heating, air conditioning, fuel oil family business. I was the third generation, and I was able to take that over at a young age. I was in my 20s, early 20s, because my father had had a heart attack, and sort of the reins had to be handed over a little quicker than probably would have been preferred. But the results were good. That I made more money than my dad had been doing with it because I had a lot of energy and I was out buying up other oil dealers and folding them in and trying to increase our customer base. Well, in 1985, I had grown too fast. I'd bought too many companies too quickly, leveraged myself too highly, and my bank said they weren't going to give me a line of credit for the following year, and I couldn't survive without that. So I tried to bring a partner into the business. That was unsuccessful because as soon as somebody puts money in, they would like to have control, and I didn't want to give up control. So I ended up selling the business. Once I sold the business, I took back a note and I didn't get paid. I got, I don't know the proper way to say not get paid, but there's a lot of contracting terms come to mind. Anyway, I did not get my money. I got enough money at settlement to pay all my bills, but my investment and my father's investment was going to be brought back over time. So I didn't have any money. So this asphalt business was for sale, and the broker that I had used to sell my fuel oil business came to me and said, I got a little asphalt business for sale. You can do this. And I said, I don't know the first thing about asphalt. They said, yeah, but you're a good manager. You know how to run people, and it's just thicker oil than fuel oil. And you know how to run truck drivers and the like, which I did. So I really took a flyer and bought a business that was making $75,000 a year. It was attractive to me because it was 9 months a year, and I was used to working 24 hours a day in a service business in the middle of the night and emergency calls and having to work normal hours. And I had a young family at the time, and 9 months a year and make 75,000 in the 80s sounded pretty good to me. So I jumped on board, and trying to buy a business with no money was a challenge. So because I had some structure to my life and had some friends that trusted in me and I had behaved properly early on, that came home to roost that I went to 30 different people I knew that had money and asked each one of them if they would lend me $10,000 unsecured in exchange for 20% interest, which in the mid 80s was the prime rate was 18 or 19%. So it sounds worse than it was, and a piece of the profits until I paid them back. And out of that 30, 10 people said yes. So I had $100,000 unsecured, and I went to a bank, and a bank knew me from my past and said, "We believe in you. We think you can do it." They gave me $300,000. So I was able to come up with enough money to buy this business. But the day after I made settlement and I came in and met the employees for the first time, because the owner didn't want to tell anybody he was selling until it was signed and sealed and delivered, I found out that I'd bought a bunch of junk. The
Hmm.
equipment was worn out. There wasn't a battery in the business in any piece of equipment that would start it. So an employee would have to jump start the first truck, and that truck would jump start the next truck, on and
Wow.
on. So it was just run into the ground, depleted, and I had leveraged everything I had. So I was really up against the wall with equipment, and the asphalt plant needed extensive work, and I wasn't smart enough to see that in advance. So I had to make the best of it. I had a family, I had a mortgage, I had 3 kids to feed, I had no money, so this was it. So I had 4 employees, and I just said, "Teach me, show me what you do. How does this work?" And they took me and they showed me how each thing worked, how to produce asphalt, and how to run a loader and a paver and a roller. So I worked my way through the business, and within the first few months, I reached out and hired some people so I could put together a crew that a couple guys could stay in the plant and make asphalt, and a crew could go out and perform work. So it was really hand to mouth for the first weeks or months. I didn't know how I was going to make payroll. I didn't know how I would even pay my bills, but I was really blessed. And I have a lot of Christian faith that, there was some other force at work that guided me through that and kept me um, getting up out of bed every day and giving it my best shot. But the results of that effort, hard work, perseverance was that slowly I started building the business up. I made some customers, volume went up each month, month over month, year over year. I was able to hire some people and then buy some used equipment. And after 2 or 3 years, it was really a viable business with 20 or 30 people and was something that, made logical sense. But early on, it was a leap of faith. And I don't know how, looking back, I don't know how I made it.
Some people would say, I've heard business owners say something to the effect of, I'm always looking for the home run. I'm always looking for the big hit, the big project that's gonna make it. Are you a home run guy or a base hit guy when it comes to business?
Well, the home run reminds me of Ralph Cramden and the Honeymooners. We always had this get rich quick scheme, and it just seems like in life there is no get rich quick scheme. If you win that quick, you lose it just as quick. It's high risk type of environment. So, I guess I would look at this business as it's a series of singles that you make a little bit of money and you get lucky and you get a job, and each one's a single, a single, a single. Once in a while, and I'm going to say it's only once or twice a year, if you're an entrepreneur and if you can uh, have the ability to seize an opportunity will present itself where maybe you can hit a double or triple or even a home run. But you got to keep hitting singles every week. So when the time comes, and maybe it's the third week of June, you get an opportunity for a giant job, and there's not a lot of competition, and you can actually get a couple points more than you would normally get. You never get that big home run, but at that point, it's like you wait all year for a couple of jobs that really make your year. So that's been my experience over 20 some years. It's a lot of singles. If you could hit singles all day, you'll survive. But if you do that and you try not to have any strikeouts, and occasionally you have some bad jobs, so there are
Mhm.
strikeouts. But if you can be in the position, the luck will come your way, and a few times you'll get a chance to hit that home run.
Good advice. Now, when it comes to an entrepreneurial startup, um, when you started your business, did you have a plan B or was your back against the wall after you bought the asphalt business?
Yeah, I guess my plan B would have been bankruptcy. That's why they call it B for bankruptcy. I had no plan B. It was really do or die at that point. I just, I had a lot of faith in myself that I just, I was brought up and in a single parent family, and my mother always taught me, it's, you got to get up, dust yourself off, and move on. And life was full of challenges. And I grew up and had incidents in school and stuff where it counted more of how you got up and dusted yourself off than how many times you got knocked down. So that stuck with me that, I can get knocked down. And I certainly got knocked down selling a business and not getting paid. But I just saw that, I had the wherewithal that I could get up every day and I could compete. I could learn this business. Other people do it, and I could master it and hopefully, outmaneuver them.
Gotcha. Great stuff. Tell us about some strategies, specific strategies or things that you did to grow the business from that 5-person operation to where it maybe over the first couple of years. What were some specific things you remember doing that allowed you to grow from 5 people to say 20 or 30 people after a couple of years?
Um, Unbeknownst to me at the time, I guess I was living those core values, even though they weren't printed and maybe they weren't even front of my mind. But one of the things we did is we did what we said we were going to do. Whether it was we're going to show up on a job on Thursday, we showed up on a job on Thursday. If we said we were going to pay a bill in 30 days, we paid the bill in 30 days. So to me, it was about integrity and, respect for others that, you know, you have to trust other people to be successful. So the very first thing I'd say is I hired people and I trusted them. And at the time I wasn't aware of what I was doing, but today I would say I hire for values, aptitude and knowledge of the business. That means something to me, but I'm not going to hire you on that basis. I'm more interested in how you feel about things, how you treat people, how you live your life. If that's aligned with my thoughts, then I can train you the other part of the way. I can send you for training. So we can give you the aptitude, but knowing that. So early on, I tried to surround myself with people that I felt were fair-minded, honest, hardworking people that I could rely on. And, we certainly, over the years, you have good people come and go, but there's certainly a core of people that helped me build the business. So trusting people and having the ability to look in the mirror in the morning and realize I do have a culture, I do have values, and I want to work with people that don't yell, that want to have a little bit of fun at work, that are going to be honest with people when nobody's watching. So I guess that was the trusting of people was the cornerstone to how I build it.
Sure. So let's go back to the core values a little bit. Would you say that the process of documenting your core values is a process of uncovering something that's already there inside of you, or is it something you have to develop?
I think it's a focus. A lot of business people want to be everything to everybody, and they never met a job they didn't like, and they'll travel 100 miles to do a job, and they'll buy a new machine and think they can branch into something new and it'll be profitable. And, over time, I've come to the realization that, you want to stick with what you do best, and you really want to just look at those geographic boundaries. Where are the fences? At what point do I not make money? If I drive 50 miles from here to do the same thing, I'm not going to make the kind of money if I drove 10 miles from here to do it. And if you realize that and you stop chasing the elusive next job, bigger job, better job, and you say, what is it that we do? Why do we do it? What's important? And I think that takes some maturity, because when you're in your 20s and 30s, you got a lot of vim and vigor and energy, and you're just out there and you just go, 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 go. And you overcome some of your shortcomings because you have so much energy and you're doing so much. The good ones outweigh the bad ones. But as you mature in a business life, you start looking at the bad ones and wonder why you did what you did. And you also think, you know what? It would be important to do more of what I do best. So, one thought, I think Marcus Pennington wrote a book about it. It's like if you're in school and you flunk at math, well, don't take a job that has math. Don't worry about you got to do better at math. If you're good at science and reading, go into that a venue that's has those as parameters. So in a business sense, we look at what we do, and we're paving contractors. So we mill and pave. I don't do so great at concrete. I don't do so great at site work. But when it comes to milling and paving, I don't think anybody can beat me. So it took a long time to mature to say, look, let's not be a site contractor and let's not take every job. Let's concentrate on jobs that have the majority of work that are milling and paving. That's what we do. That's what we do best. Let's stick with that. Let's not take every job. And that's really paid off for me.
So how much discipline does that take? How hard is it to stay focused like that when maybe asphalt work is slow, especially in the winter months in your part of the country. And there's other opportunities when you're looking at 3 months with very little revenue, no work to be done, and there is maybe utility work or site work. Is that a challenge for your company? Is that something that you have to really continue to preach to your folks, that we stay focused on milling and paving?
I would like to say yes. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, as we say. We have to survive. So I have 100 people working here. They're depending on me for a living. I think it would be against my core values if I just said, look, I'm going to stick with what we do and there's no work, so you're laid off. I would look at it when we just lived through, a heck of an economic cycle, that we had to go out and bid for public work, which I would prefer not to do, but there was no private work going on. So we altered our business model where we normally would rather do more negotiated work for private owners than we would bidding in an envelope to a public entity that doesn't care about anything but price. But because the economy turned and the work wasn't there, we did go to the available work, which does have curb work in it and striping and other things that we would subcontract and do. But I, as a businessman, I had to find a way to make lemonade out of lemons. So we had to create income. We have equipment. They sometimes say you got to feed the beast. I have a lot of hard assets. I have asphalt plants. I have trucks. They don't. You can liquidate some of them, but I have the equipment to move forward and do work. And I felt an obligation to do it. But more so the core values, the personal obligation, looking around at my management team and saying, what is it we can do? How can we make money? And what is it we should do? So I think one of the challenges is, what can you trust your people? Can you trust their judgment when they say, hey, I got a great idea, let's get into seal coating, we never did it before, and to then have a business mind and say, all right, maybe that's a good idea, maybe it's a bad idea, but let's study it, let's not be emotional about it, let's put a budget together and see if it makes sense, and try to stay to your own personal core values, that you want to help people, you want to keep your people employed, but it has to make business sense. You're answering to the total number of people, and you have a fiduciary responsibility to be in business 2 years from now. It doesn't do any good if you fumble the ball and you go bankrupt, then everybody's out of work. So I always take it that, I'm really shouldered with a lot of responsibility for a lot of people, and I got to just be the glue to keep us together, keep us on track, and make sure that we study things and we make the right moves so we're successful long term.
Here's a question that I think will help other folks who are business owners and they're contemplating going into different areas of business, new lines of business, looking at other opportunities. What are 2 or 3 things that you look at in your process of considering new opportunities? For example, seal coating or some other line of business that's related to what you're doing.
Well, the synergistic value, meaning that if I already have assets, workers, pickup trucks, equipment that could be used for another type of business. So I could get into, and seal coat's a good example, I could get into seal coating. I already have people working for me that have done that in the past. I have the supervision set up. I have the job cost set up. I have the receivables, the billing department. I have blowers. I have tampers. I have advertising. We have a customer base. We're selling paving jobs. We could go back 3 years later and say, hey, we sold you your parking lot. How about we seal coat it? All that makes a lot of sense. So to me, that would be a great segue into another business with minimal risk and maximizing the use of my assets. So all we really need to do is learn the product and make a relationship with a few more suppliers and decide what the selling proposition is. So that would be a good move. If somebody said get into concrete work, that's a little different story, because I don't have anybody that does concrete work, and we'd have to spend money and buy forms and have different type of trucks, and it's different type of work, and what's the production per day we could do, and could I keep that crew busy, on and on and on. It's a little different example that I do have trucks, I do have receivables, but it's not perfectly aligned. So that would be a much higher risk for us to get into concrete work. And then the side thought is, if we got into concrete work, right now we have maybe 6 good concrete subcontractors that work for me all the time. Sometimes I need 6 jobs being done at once, and sometimes I don't have any jobs. If I had my own crew, how would those subcontractors view me? As their competitor, so their pricing wouldn't be so great to me. And at times I would need them, and at times I wouldn't need them. I'd become an adversary or a competitor to them instead of a partner with them. So for that reason, even if it made some monetary sense, we would look at the rest of the story and say, it may help us make another $1 million in sales doing concrete work, but it's going to cost me relationships with my subs that allow me to grow and do more paving and milling work. So, which direction are you going to go?
Sure. So take a holistic view, really look at it from all sides before you make a move.
Exactly. And as a management style, what I would suggest is ask questions. Too many times, and I'm guilty of this myself, that I have an idea and I want to run with it and I go out and I'm telling people what we're going to do. And I found that if you go out and ask people, what do you think of this idea? And don't have your mindset, and be willing to listen and be willing to be wrong, you'll learn a lot. And before we ever discipline anybody, we always ask questions. Why did you do that? And it's surprising how many times the employee will explain what his logic was. And it's not flawed logic. It may not have turned out the way we wanted, but when you understood the motive, it was like, well, you're not really wrong, but that's not how we go about it, as opposed to just doing something that was flat out wrong. So
Sure.
asking questions is critical for a success of a business owner. Start off asking questions. Don't start off telling somebody or telling somebody off.
Yep. So that's a good guiding principle for all leaders. It sounds like, whether it's an HR issue, a customer issue, a project issue, whatever it may be, always start with ask questions. What I've found is assumptions. Usually we have a tendency to make assumptions, whether it's we assume that this new business idea is going to work because it popped into our head, or we assume something happened with an employee. But my experience has been a lot of times those assumptions are wrong. So it's good to ask questions, definitely.
I no more better use of what you just said about making assumptions goes to the selling of any kind of service. If you ask your customer what's important to them, we go in and you would assume what's important to him is that he wants a smooth pavement, he wants the best price and all that. It's remarkable to us when we talk to a customer, and what's important to them is, can you get this done when I'm closed? How will this affect my customer traffic when it's coming in here? I'm worried about the safety of people walking across the lot or anything. What they're concerned about could be totally different than what we were going to talk about. So by asking questions, what's important to them? Number one, it's not always about price. I'm convinced of that. And we're not a low price vendor. So it's important to me people see value in what we do. But we can address customers' concerns if they'll share with me what it is that's on their mind, or why are they making this buying decision. We can then speak to them to coincide with what their needs are and solve their problem. If it means paving their parking lot at night, or setting up barriers so all our customers know that we'll be working in a section a lot, or doing it in pieces so they can always remain open. Those are the important things. So it all comes by asking questions.
Yeah, I think that's great. I've been in sales pitches, either from suppliers, or I've been in them with contractors, and the contractor wants to go straight into the technical details. We're going to use this type of equipment and this model of an excavator, and we're going to use this product. And the customer's eyes just glaze over. They don't care.
That's correct.
The technical side of it is rarely that important to them. They're more concerned about effect on their business, their employees, their customers, and things like that. So that's fantastic advice. Lead with asking questions, especially when it comes to selling to your customers. It'll lead the conversation. You can go after what's really important to them, definitely. Let me shift gears on you. Let me ask you this question regarding systems. What I've found, my approach to leadership is a lot of things can be solved with repeatable systems. You need a process, whether it's billing, HR, training, onboarding, actual logistics in the field. Having a system is very important. Have you implemented any unique systems in your business that you feel like have been a key to your success? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, we have, and we use, all the, the industry stuff, the GPS and the, having payroll input from the field via laptops, or, ticketing software, estimating software that, those everybody have access to. But I guess what we created that I think is very meaningful to us is what we call a flash report. It's a weekly report that I get from my staff, and it's a culmination of equipment that tells me where we are from a cash position, how much money came in last week, what our billings were for the week, what's my over 90 category, where do I stand with my payables, what's my payroll amount, how many people, and what are the total dollars, what's my borrowing capacity, where am I on my line of credit, all on one dashboard piece of paper. So not only do I get that, but I share that with my top management, which is, there's a 4-person management team underneath me, and each one of those have a few direct reports. So there's a team of about 18 people that have access to see that report and see where we're going, so we can chart the course and see, hey, what's out of whack, where do we need help with? Maybe somebody besides the collection people could use a little help collecting some money. And maybe it's a production person says, hey, I have a relationship with a superintendent. Let me call and see if you can speed things along for us, or see what the problem is. Or maybe it's a punch list and production needs to know about it and kick it up a gear so we can get our money. But by having everybody on the same page and using reports that we just basically said, what's important to us, what do we want to see? That would be one example of something I think that I don't know whether I created it, but it's something we live by, that it just is simple. Everybody has the information, but did they put it all in one place where it's usable?
Great. I like that, the dashboard analogy. I think that's incredibly important. Regarding that, some business owners would be concerned about having that kind of transparency, letting anyone see anything about financials, how much money's out there, how much money's being made, borrowing capacity. What would you say to a business owner who is putting on the brakes and kind of locking up against the idea of sharing that level of information with their employees?
I would challenge their thought, because I don't think I've ever met a contractor that says I'm making enough money. The only guys that seem to say that are maybe the dishonest people, and I figure sooner or later that'll come home to roost. But most hardworking guys are up against it. They work hard, and they make a minimum margin for the risk we take in the construction industry, nationwide. So if a contractor can really look in the mirror and say, am I embarrassed with what I'm making? Is it that much money that I wouldn't want anybody to know? I think most of them would say, boy, I should make more money. I shouldn't have so much bad debt, and I should get more margin on my work. So the way to get that down to the level is to show them, and we've actually run courses in-house here trying to over communicate and repeat our message. But we actually took a penny and we cut it in half. And we had a meeting with our, line personnel, people that don't look at numbers every day. They're out in the field, they're doing the work. And we had a penny and a half, which represented 1.5% income. And that's the income level that a heavy highway contractor typically makes. And we tried to explain to them that out of every dollar that we bill, this is how much we get to keep. And it gave them a visual. It's like a penny and a half. I'm holding up a penny and a half. Pass around. Out of every dollar, this is what's left. And it's only left if you do the right job, if you get the job done in the time that we estimated, and we don't use too much material, and everybody pays their bills, and we buy our insurance at the right amount, and we negotiate with our bank and get a good interest rate, and all the things that go into what comes off the top. And try to share with them is, once we sell a job, the top line is locked. We can't change that. What we can change is the cost underneath that. And if everybody thinks, is there a better way, a cheaper way, an efficient way that we can do the job and maybe pick up 1 or 2%, that's all it takes. The horse race is only won by a nose. We don't have to be 10 yards better than everybody else. We only have to be a nose better, but a nose is 1%. So how many guys on the field could change that? How many could either, work more diligently, not waste gasoline, not ruin my tamper, not send back too much material because they didn't bother to measure. I mean, they have a lot of things in their control that could be 1% of my business, and 1% for me could double my profit. So I think it's indicative of construction companies or owners, and they don't have to give them the dollars. You can talk about percentages, and that takes the edge off when if you don't want to tell somebody you're making 150 grand a year, you could tell them what the percentage is, and it would fall in and they would get the message. But I think the open book policy, there's 10 times more good to it than there is bad. And I'm an open book company. I don't think anybody's ever come to me and said, look at the car you're driving, or why do you make the money you make? I think there's a realization is, wow, if I sat in your shoes, I don't know that I could do what you do. And you're entitled to that. You put your house on the line, you put your life on the line, financially anyway, to make a living. So they have to understand it. If they don't understand it, you don't share the data. It's like playing golf without a hole. They just hit the ball all day long, and what fun is it? They don't know when they did good and they don't know when they did bad. If they know the numbers, they can see is, yes, we won on this job. This was a good job, or ouch, that job hurt. We'll make it up on the next one, boss. But they're part of the team with you, and you have to let them keep score, or what's the point?
Right, exactly. I agree completely. And by telling people this is the mountain we want to take, here's where the hole is, then you leverage the collective knowledge and abilities and creativity of the boots on the ground, the people that are actually doing it. And I agree. I think the results far outweigh the disadvantages of that. I know we're running short on time. I want to ask just a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap this up. Um, Real quickly, tell us a little bit about your philosophy and approach when it comes to leading people.
Well, I guess the golden rule comes to mind is, I want to treat other people as I'd want to be treated. I had, and I'll call it a luxury of working my way up through this business. So it wasn't handed down to me. I didn't start at the top. I know what it takes. I know how hot it is in August to be putting asphalt down, and I know how hard that work is. So I can appreciate what a laborer's viewpoint is and what's important to him about us providing ice water or just little things that go on in a business. But it really comes down to respect. I respect what they do. In turn, I would hope they respect what I do, that, we have to go out and find the work, that they have a steady paycheck, and we have to take some financial risks, and we have to front money on jobs, and we have to buy a lot of expensive equipment so we can be state of the art and be efficient. And, they're all risks. So the leading people by respect, understanding what they're up against, asking those questions of even my office people is, why isn't this done yet? Instead of, why isn't this done yet? It's more of an open question. Then you find out, well, this person was out and I had to pick up the slack over here and I took care of this for you too. And things that I wouldn't have even known. And it becomes a thank you event, not a chastising event. So
Mhm.
it's that respect thing. It just comes back to me over and over again, being honest with my employees, making sure they get what they're entitled to, making sure they got their benefits paid for, and try to give them a life that is would make them want to come to work, because they have a choice. They don't have to work here. They could work anywhere. So I want them to not only choose to work here, but to be happy to come to work here and care about their coworkers, and make it an environment that we all want to be in.
Great stuff. Um, what's the what's the single most important activity in your business? If there's one thing that you as the owner needs to focus on, what would that one area be?
Alignment. I we use the book The Advantage by Pat Lencioni, and it's all about alignment. It's getting your team together, and first you got to break down the walls and get the interpersonal relationships at the table. Who's mad at somebody for something they did, or doesn't like their attitude, or doesn't like the way they do things, and get that stuff out on the table. And it's similar to, just getting along with people in your own family. First you got to get everybody that their hearts are on the table, and then realize we're all in it together, and we decide, we don't all agree, but we decide on a path of action. We leave the room after a management meeting of one mind, and we need to communicate it over and over and over down through the ranks, so we're all saying the same thing the same way. And all the people that work here and our customers look at us and, hey, we're in unison. We are all saying the same thing. We're headed in the same direction. So that alignment is the single most important job I have. Of if I see disalignment, or I see disrespect, or I feel some friction between people, is to get involved and, like, what's going on? Don't you understand? Or so learn it myself. What is the problem? So we can keep everybody on the same direction, getting along, going for the same goal.
All right, here's a question for you along the lines of alignment. What if you are working for a company and you are not aligned with the ownership of the company? You feel like your core values are appropriate, but there are issues with the way the ownership of the company operates, whether it's a corporation or a sole proprietor, and you just have issues. You're not aligned with their core values. What would your advice be to that person?
That is the most joyful moment of owning a business, when you can divorce a customer and say, you know what, I'd rather be your friend than your vendor. Have a nice day, but just move on. And we've fired some of our customers that just the demands are placed upon us, and it was always they won and we lost, and there was no recognition for, us going the 11th yard for them, or whatever the event. So we've taken those customers out of our quandary, and either it's a credit situation, or a performance situation, or communication situation, or an honesty situation. And I've never felt better in my life than when we say to somebody, you know what, we're not your guy, and we get them out of the ranks. The elevated uh, feeling in the office, just it gets rid of that negative, and everybody's happier, and we're working for people we want to work for that appreciate us, it just gets so much better. So I would think that's a joyful moment when you can say, you know what, tell the guy thank you, but no thank you. Find another guy in a polite way.
Gotcha. Now, when it comes to when you said you're looking for misalignment amongst the ranks in your company, what are some red flags? What are some early indicators that you have an alignment issue that you look for?
Um, in a meeting venue where you can almost sense it, where somebody asks a question, but it's a loaded question. Is, well,
Mm.
why did you get involved in that? That's my area. And, now I'm wondering, why was somebody else involved in that area? Now, maybe it was well-meaning. He thought he was helping, but in reality, he didn't know all the circumstances. So what he did that he thought was helpful, in fact, was not helpful. So somebody's feelings got hurt. The other person thought they did the right thing, and right away there's somebody at odds. So I need to open that can of worms up, get it on the table, and say, all right, let's hear the whole story. What happened? What were your plans? And then by somebody else interacting in that transaction, why did that screw us up? Why did that send a mixed message to our people or to our customer? And that happens occasionally. It's all good-meaning people. They're thinking they're doing the right thing, but unfortunately, we don't all have all the facts all the time. So what we think is the right thing sometimes isn't the right thing. So we need to forgive each other, understand why it was done, and if you realize the other guy didn't do it with any malice or ill will, it's a lot easier to forgive and say, all right, you know what, that messed me up, but you tried to do the right thing, but here's what really happened, and we all leave here happy. So I pick that up as it's just it's a breakfast meeting, a lunch meeting, or across the conference table. You can sense it when somebody's a little concerned about somebody else, and I don't let that go. I don't just stick my head in the sand. I open that up.
So if that happens, is that something where you grab those two people and get in a room and start asking questions, or is that something you deal with if it's a larger meeting, is it something you deal with in a team meeting, a department meeting, or is it as small of a venue as possible?
I love to give people accolades in public. If they do something well, I like to stand on the soapbox and tell everybody this guy did a good job and here's what he did and here's why I appreciate it. But when it comes to chastising or discipline somebody, that's something I do in private. I don't think it's fair to an employee to do that in front of his coworkers. So if I have an issue and two people aren't getting along, I will meet with them one on one separately and ask
Mm.
the questions. Start off with, what's going on? Why? What happened? What's your version? Why do you think the way you do? And then I'll hear it from both sides, and then I'll ask both sides to get together without me. They should really go back head to head, but I'll try to be the mediator, so to speak, to allow both sides to say, you know what, the other guy wasn't really thinking that. He wasn't aware of that. Why don't you guys talk about that? And just get them in a room. I don't need to be in the room. I expect to have mature people that are forgiving, that can work through those issues on their own. But sometimes they need the rest of the story, so they're realizing that nobody's out for their job or to hurt them or to embarrass them, type of thing. So it's one-on-one communication, and then I let those two guys go at it together and work it out. If they fail to work it out, there's a question whether they belong on my team. That's a skill
Uh,
that I would expect them to work those things out. I don't need to be the referee.
Interesting. Now, is that in my experience, it's been very difficult to instruct two people to go work it out amongst themselves. Is that a challenge?
It is a challenge, and it's an art because it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So I'm
Mhm.
trying to be their counselor. I'm trying to be their confidant. I don't share everything they share with me, because they all have their own, vision of what should happen, and who's better than somebody else, and all that. But I can see from my perch what everybody makes, what their contributions are to the company, and why each one's important. And maybe from their step on the ladder, a step or two below me, they don't have the same view of the same situation. But to me, it does go to respect and honesty. If you're honest and you respect your fellow worker, isn't it going to work out? If you do what you say you're going to do and show some integrity, isn't it going to work out? And you got to trust each other, because if you don't trust each other, you can't be on my team. So I'm right back to those core values again, is you better live them. And if you live them, you're going to work out the interpersonal problems. And if you can't work out the interpersonal problems, then I got to look at you and say, then you're not really using the core values.
All right, let's say you're giving some advice to someone who's they've been in a business, been working for a company for 5, 10 years, and they just they have trust issues where they don't trust the decisions that the leadership or the ownership of their company is making, and they're not aligned with their core values. The ownership wants to do things that they don't agree with, they don't think are morally, ethically, legally correct. What would you tell that person to try to fix the situation or to get off the bus?
I would, my first reaction is get off the bus, because if they're underneath the management is leading in that style and they're not aligned with what they want to do, especially when it comes to the dishonesty portion, I don't know that that's something you're going to correct from below. That's a real high mountain to climb, to go to the boss and say you're wrong and you're dishonest and I won't stand for it. You'll probably get fired on the spot for making that kind of challenge. So, in with the time of life and how important time is, you'd probably be better suited just to jump ship, I think, and find a better place to work. It would really be nice, utopia, is if you could be honest in an exit interview and actually tell the person, I'm leaving, and I'm leaving because I'm not aligned with your values. Here's how I see your values, and here's my values, and you can see we're not on the same page. And if the owner could take that and maybe look in the mirror that night, maybe you help the situation on the way out. If he really values, maybe he tries to talk you out of leaving and saying, you know what, you're calling me on my behavior and you're right, I'm wrong, let me fix it. Then I would say you got a shot at staying and making something out of it.
Gotcha. Good advice. Um, you mentioned a book. What's the one, and I may already know the answer to this, but I'll ask the question anyway. What is one book on business or leadership that you would recommend that every one of our listeners read?
I've read quite a few, and head and shoulders above the rest. Pat Lencioni is the author. The Advantage is the book, and I bought one for each of my management team. It took us a year to get through it. We went through chapter by chapter. We met together for 2 hours every other week, and we followed that as our guideline of what we need to do to strip ourselves down, to open ourselves up, to recognize each other, and to get on the same page. And that far and away has made a bigger difference in my leadership and the leadership of my company than any other book that we've passed around. We used it communally. We all have it. We all still have it. I go into my vice president's office and that book is on the credenza behind them. We refer back to it when we get in a little trouble. It's like, wait a minute, we covered this. So I really enjoyed that book, and it became a living document for us.
Great. Um, Two more questions. If you could go back in time in say 10 years, what one piece of advice would you give to Bob 10 years ago?
Stop working in the business and start working on the business. It's it's too easy as an entrepreneur to you grow your business and you're used to doing things and you keep what you like to do, and to mature in your business and let your business grow, you really got to train other people to do what you like to do and let them do it. And you should be concentrating on the vision, on the systems, on the standardization of policies so people can rely on it. This is how we do things, and looking at procedures and looking from the top down on your business. And there's groups you can join like Vistage or Tag or C12 that are, ownership type of businesses that'll help you with that. But it's making the transition from entrepreneur to a professionally managed business has the long-term value. When you sell your business or do whatever, it's going to be worth more because it's an organization. It's not the Bob Brown show. So 10 years ago, I was working in the business. I was doing estimating and talking to customers all the time and being involved. And I realized that I really need to step up and delegate all that stuff. I can still talk to customers, but I go talk to the customers that are my top customers, or customers that it's a big sale and I'll go along to help close it. I'll go where I'm needed. I don't have a job in the business that I need to perform. I'm able to just keep the vision going and work on the business. So it's difficult transition because you got to pay money and hire people to do what you do. But the bonus, the dividend is so great of your own time, your own life back. You can take a vacation, you can plan your business, you can see what's actually going on. You just become a greater person for it.
What are a couple of how-tos that you could share with someone who's there? They're an entrepreneur. They realize that they have to make the jump to grow their business, but they're working in their business. They own a job right now, and they want to operate a business. What are a couple of how-tos that you would tell those people?
I think get some outside help, get a business coach, get somebody that you can talk to outside your own business that can be objective, that can challenge your thought of why you do what you do. Why do you do it the same way? Why do you think that's the only way or the best way? You really need somebody outside the forest looking in that could say, you know what, you're crazy. Why do you do that? It doesn't make sense. Because when you live it, eat it, sleep, breathe, you take for granted this is the way we do it. It's the way we've always done it, and you have no idea that there's a better way, an easier way, a way that makes more money. So to me, I would suggest anybody either join a group where you can commit to other people and take a day a month and go spend it with other business owners and talk about ideas, talk about problems. You are great counsel for them, so it's a great reward that you can help others through their life by sharing your experiences and your failures with them so they don't make the failures. But then when you're challenged by any subject, you can throw it on the table and you're going to get 12 opinions thrown at you from other business owners. And I'll guarantee two or three of them you never would have thought of on your own. And they may be great nuggets to bring back home and act on. So to me, it's get that outside help, either a coach or join a business owners group and get that counsel.
Great advice. Well, that gets us about to our time limit. I don't want to keep you any longer. I really appreciate you taking the time. This has been extremely helpful. Great strategies, great tactics, some how-tos. I'm definitely interested in reading Pat Lencioni's book. I'll go download that today. So if Bob, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
My email address, it's Bob Brown at American Asphalt Company, COMPANY spelled out, .com. That's the easiest way to get me.
And if people have questions, is it okay for them just to shoot you an email, maybe if it's on leadership or they want to follow up on some of the things you talked about today? Would that be all right?
That would be great. That's my calling in life, is to help other people. That motivates me. So if I can help somebody along the way, I would be pleased to do so.
Fantastic. Well, I'll make sure and put some show notes together from the things we talked about. I'll have a link to the book, and I'll also list your email address in there as well. And you have succeeded, sir, in helping us today. I greatly appreciate it, and wish you the best of luck.
Well, thank you very much, Todd.